the 20th verse, which we last did. The body, sense organs, mind and intellect perform their respective activities. Depending upon the vitality of the Atman. Everything depends on the Atman, just as the people are activized in the sunlit world. So it compares the Atman to be the sun, just as every creature bristles into activity with the first ray of sunlight. It is that energizing principle. It's a life-giving force. Exactly the same way he compares the Atman to be the life-giving principle. It is that which lends life, lends sentiency to the matter equipments which are insentient, which are lifeless. But we have also understood, and we must understand, the Shastras keep repeating it so that we understand that Atman is the animating principle. It animates them. And yet Atman also is the inactive principle. Remember saying these two aspects you should have captured, you would have captured this when I said last week. The Atman is the activating principle. Atman is also the inactive principle. So when you say the activating principle, it becomes responsible for the action. Inactive principle, it is totally detached to action. So when one identifies with the Atman, you tend to function and operate in this principle of leading a life of action. You become dynamic, you're responsible for everything to happen in life. At the same time, you remain disconnected, detached, disinterested from that which you are responsible, for that which you are performing action. So you will be able to maintain that spirit of renunciation, that spirit of detachment while you're engaged in action. And this, in fact, is the true spirit of being spiritual. Spirituality is not abandoning action. Other day I was being informed by one of the well-wishers, in fact it was Setuji, if I'm not wrong. Setuji, would you want to, remember you were mentioning of a gentleman other day, a young man, a young businessman, who wanted to abandon his business, who wanted to leave his family, leave his belongings, and he wanted to walk into the woods. And he's just barely early 40s, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you happen to meet him. Yeah. Is it what it is?
Yeah. Guruji, I know him well, and
right.
He's a young trader. He is a Jain. So he has been working from the age 15. So
right.
Last 28 years, he's from rags to riches story. So, but he says now he is totally disillusioned, and he thinks this is an illusion. Everything in the world is an illusion. So he is a little fed up, but he has two children. One son already got married. Another son is there. Young wife is there, but he has taken permission from parents also that in the Jainism they abandon everything and they become initially they are initiated, then they become a monk. So he is contemplating for that, but somehow he suddenly thought, he knows we are in this seva activities for the last 7 years, and also he just wanted to have a chat with me. Then I said, I told about you, we will have a discussion, because I also understood he is taking a decision in a hurry. And then I said, don't hurry up and all, but he is thinking of more out of, you can say, he is not, he says in recently he lost few of the relatives, young relatives, at a very young age, they have expired. All this has made him that this life is full of suffering. So that is the reason he wants to, not into the woods, he wants to become a Jain monk. He has to leave everything. His wife has not yet permitted him. See, unless wife permits and family permits, he cannot, according to them, he cannot get into that.
Sir, I am
So
also waiting. Tell him I am also waiting. I have been long waiting.
Yeah,
The moment she gets even a half nod, I'm going to run away. Not a full nod. So, in fact,
so you are making everyone do that here.
No. I wanted to meet him so that we both run away together. No. On lighter note, in fact, I'm trying to draw this dialogue we just had a couple of days ago. See, what is the underlying thing one wants to pick up or take to spirituality is because of you. In fact, he said, yeah, Vijayji, why do you think? What is it people are, why is he drawn to the gentleman?
I don't know. To my simplistic mind, it has to be a positive move and not running away into something, hoping that something will come the other place.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Yes. Hariji. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Is it the same case with others?
No. Yeah. Hari Om Guruji.
Yes, sir.
Hari Om Guruji.
Hariji, I wanted Hariji to answer. No. But
can you hear me?
Yes. Now we can hear you, Hariji.
Yeah. I think that is running away. You are not able to face the world. Yeah. It is if the people, if his young relatives had not died, if he had not met some of the disappointments in life, would he have run away, given up everything and gone? That is not what Vedanta is teaching us. Vedanta is teaching us to be in the world, face the world, and be calm and peaceful when we are in the midst of the market. It's not running away. We cannot bring Buddha as an example here. That is a very, very exceptional case. If everybody tries to run away from life like what Buddha did, the whole world will run away.
No, but Buddha did not run away from life.
No, Buddha, yes.
As you say, he was an extraordinary personality. You can't take that as an ideal, or that has a yardstick and operate. Yeah. In fact, you should never ever copy the exterior of an action of another person. Forget the caliber of Buddha.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to understand another person. So you should do what is innate and unique to you.
Yeah.
In fact, we are often cautioned in spiritual parlance, in spiritual fields, we are often cautioned not to do what masters do. We are often told to do
follow what they say,
what they speak, what they say. Yeah. So never go or follow the lifestyles of Mahatmas.
Yeah.
Or any celebrity for that matter. or any leader for that matter, don't do what they did. You imbibe their teachings and adapt it in your own life so that you evolve, you know. So the teachings are universal, not their lifestyles. So as you rightly said, it is escapism. They are running away, you know. He's fed up with life, he has made success, and yet he has not found that inner peace and satisfaction, you know. As he said, from rags to riches. So he is quite successful, and then he has already got a family. Perhaps at a very young age he feels he has done all that life has to satisfy, and there's nothing more for him to look forward to.
From the material angle.
Yeah, that's the material angle. And then his concept of spirituality, in fact, you know, the real, there are two things we always say. I hope we don't contradict here. You know, on one hand, we say that you should be suffocated with what life you are leading. Suffocating with life in the sense you should not start worshipping what you're doing as everything in life. So you understand the hollowness in it. And on the other side, one side is the suffocation, and on the other side, I almost lost the flow of thought. What was I saying? What was I saying just prior to this, Hariji?
You're asking me?
Yes, Hariji. What was I saying just before I got to this?
That we should we should not run away. We should practice. We should experience the world. You were meaning that.
Yeah. I was just trying to. I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
Guruji, you told suffocating, not emulate, and on the other hand, one hand is suffocating, on the other hand, you said.
No, this is what you have been telling in the last class, that to ensure that you feel suffocated so that you want to come out of it. Because
No,
of the
correct.
suffocation.
No, correct. No, what Setuji and Hariji, glad you brought me to it. See, the two sides to it. One side, you should feel suffocated with life, which means you should not start worshipping or believing that's all life is. And on the other hand, you should be able to take up any aspect of life and be able to find utter contentment and find the joy and satisfaction with it. These two are two sides of a coin, but conveying the same spiritual state. I repeat, one side of the coin is where you feel a sense of suffocation. This is not all what life is. You should aspire for something greater. So that selfishness of life suffocates you. So you aspire for something grander. And the flip side, other side of it is, even in the smallest and simplest of things of life, you find that joy and contentment. You find you'll be able to eke everything from the simple aspects of life. You don't have to do anything extraordinary to find that happiness. I don't know whether you're able to relate to what I'm saying. These two aspects. One is suffocation, other is a sense of contentment in the. For example, it's like somebody gives you a piece of muruku, you get so excited, you know. You get so excited and you're so happy that even a small little muruku comes your way, you are jumping with joy and contentment and has satisfaction. How many people can relate to muruku here? Oh, Ushama. I thought there's only one or two. I can only relate to one person, but yes, Ushama.
Yeah, But Guruji, is it possible to be contented with small things? Then why will you feel suffocated at all?
Suffocation of being selfish and self-centered.
Mm.
If you are limiting your thoughts only to I and mine, that is suffocating. You will want to aspire a greater, grander purpose of life. So if you just keep thinking of yourself and your own limited needs and your limited thoughts and your limited life, that should be, it is very, I don't want to use any other word because it may not be appropriate on the platform. It's disgusting, to be frank. Sorry to use the word. It is, you feel a sense, so you can't look yourself in the mirror because it's so revulsive. Anything selfish is revulsive, suffocating. It should produce a sense of uneasiness. So you want to embrace a brighter worlds, embrace the grander and larger wisdom. So on one side, you want to aspire to become more purer. Other side of it, simplest things of life, you find contentment. They almost seem too contradictory, but these are two aspects, two independent aspects which convey the same thing.
Okay.
I'm glad I could recap that. Almost it came as a flash and then it almost disappeared, and I could bring that back. But I thought you were coming to the Murukku and then you switched off completely.
That was a very frivolous thing, Guruji.
No, it may be frivolous for you, but Harishji want to say something very lovingly. Harishji. Yes, Harishji.
Guruji, we talk of Murukku, can I be far behind? But I think the concept which you are trying to explain is the same as what we explained in the explanation is very similar to the explanation of renunciation.
Yes.
So if you look at it, when you say suffocate or constrained or everything bound, the opposite of that, which you want to get away and you want to become the opposite, is liberated, free, etc. Now, the problem comes just as in renunciation. It is not renunciation from action, it is renunciation in action. Similarly, it is not liberation from life, it is liberation in life. It is not liberation from doing your duties, but liberation while you're doing your duties. So it is a question of the mental state and not just a physical verb.
Yes,
So,
it is not. Yes, you're right. Absolutely right.
I think what you're getting to is once you have embraced a larger vision and therefore you're not constrained or bound by the small confines of your personal or the
Yes.
smaller circle, then automatically you're freer
Yes.
because you have a larger compass.
Correct.
And therefore you can continue to act, but you're not constrained.
Yes.
I suppose.
Very true. In fact, you should read what Shivaji is saying. Shivaji is saying that liberation is Murukku.
Well, if I may add to the Murukku analogy, the shape of the Murukku is very suggestive. It's a chakravyuh.
Rama, Krishna. Hari Om.
So we
I
can
don't.
any
I want to really renounce Murukku, and Harishji, for God's sake, please renounce the thought of Murukku. At least for this 1 hour, please. Now it was my mistake of bringing Murukku into the class. I shall never do that again.
Only in response to Shiva.
No. In fact, the sense of suffocation, the best way to understand is imagine a bird being caged. A bird has got that wings of freedom to explore the sky, and you just confine it to that small cage. It is just that there's no other word than suffocation. You feel a sense of uneasiness, a sense of disgust, a sense of, and all that goes the moment you explore the brighter worlds, you're allured to larger, greater experience of wisdom. All that dies away, all that goes away. All right.
Most
Harishji?
of Most of
Yes.
our rishis and munis from our rishi parampara, they all had family. They had not run away from the family.
Correct. Absolutely.
They all
Very true.
did their tapas, and they got the self-realization while remaining in the family.
Gee, is there any greater tapas than being with the family? I know not, and I don't think so. It is heaven to be
I
alone.
don't know.
It is heaven
I
to be
don't
alone.
know.
Hariji, don't say don't know. You are also grahastha. Don't try to act as if you do not have experience. Huh? So it is the greatest tapas being in it. It is the easiest thing to walk away into an ashram, to
Yeah,
find
sure.
that aloofness.
I agree.
In fact, as Mahatma
is
Gandhi says, any fool, any alpabuddhi can find shanti in shanti. Only a man of stuff, a man of character, a man of wisdom can find shanti in ashanti.
Shanti in Ashanti. Yeah.
So ashanti is grahastha. To find shanti there is the difficult part. But shanti in shanti means to find shanti in,
That's it.
means I'm not to find peace. Getting away from action is the easiest thing. So it is not renouncing action, as Harish ji also said, and you're all conveying the same thing. It is that spirit of renunciation to be embraced while you're acting. And that is what the principle of Atman is. Atman is the activating principle, and yet it remains inactive. So to be able to inject that spirit, and injecting the spirit of Atman is how closely you have identified with the truth, with the self. And that starts percolating, starts expressing in one's life. Isn't it? Okay. Shivaji, anything other than Murku, please, huh?
No. These opposite values are complementary, they coexist. It's not one without the other. So only when you know your limitation, you will be in a position to understand what is being without limitation. They coexist. It cannot be one without the other.
Yes, Shivaji, you're right. You're absolutely right.
You cannot realize one without the other. You cannot appreciate the daytime when you do not know night time. So they all coexist. It doesn't, you cannot do without one without the other. It's just not possible. In fact, what is called poison many times is given as medicine. If you see medicine in the pharmacy shop, scheduled drugs,
correct,
it is written as poison, but it is given as medicine. Without Ramayana is not complete. So one actually accentuates the other. It pushes up the other.
Yes, Ji, you're right. All right, so we'll move on. Sorry, Badrinath ji, you wanted to say something a little earlier?
This was on the subject of Prince Siddhartha. Okay, very similar to the analogy that you gave of a caged bird. Actually, Siddhartha was prevented by his family from experiencing the realities of life. He was kept away from everything, and when he managed to sneak out, and then he saw suffering which he was prevented from seeing by his family, he realized that he was living in a gilded cage. And the reason for Siddhartha to leave was he wanted to get out of the cage to understand the meaning of suffering. When he saw suffering in old people, in diseased people, then he saw the mourning of the dead. These are things that he was prevented from seeing, and so in effect he was caged. So the purpose of Siddhartha leaving is exactly what you were saying, to get out of the cage. That's what I want.
No, very aptly said. Correct. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Yes. So it is not to be taken as a yardstick or a standard.
Right.
No. So So what that gentleman is trying to do in the name of spirituality is rajasic renunciation. It's a renunciation of three folds: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Rajasic renunciation is when you want to give up something because of a pain or agony, or there's some kind of a trouble. So you find life is troublesome or challenging, you give it up. That is rajasic renunciation. You know, tamasic renunciation is out of ignorance, out of delusion, you give up something. Sattvic renunciation is you embrace action, you perform your duties, but it's the spirit of renunciation gets injected into the action. So the true renunciation is performance of your dharma, performance of your duty. So hopefully we'll be able to convey and convince this message to the gentleman so that he will be able to embrace his life with a certain vigor rather than running away from it. You know? Harish ji, you want to say something, sir?
Guruji, I just, as usual, want to quote from an earlier lecture where you said that tamasic renunciation, which is out of delusion or ignorance, the desire still exists. Even though you have renounced, the desire has not been vanquished or removed.
Correct.
Similarly, in rajasic renunciation, because you're running away from the obstacles or challenges or the mental agitation, you're trying to avoid that. That is why you're renouncing. Again, the desire still exists. So the difference between sattvic and the other kind of renunciation you drew was that the desire still exists. The difference when you act in a sattvic manner and find peace and happiness in action means the desire has been conquered, because you are focused on a higher and you are continuing to act, and just concentrating on action, which is neutral, and therefore the desire is removed from the equation.
Correct. That's the inner subtle difference, or the inner difference between sattvic and the other forms of renunciation. In fact, talking of this gentleman wanting to become a monk, in fact, all through our stay in Malaysia, the richest Indian Malaysian, the man who is famously known for the one who owns one of the Twin Towers, and the Petronas, not Petronas, I think he is one of the billionaires, and Ananta Krishnan, his name, the Indian richest Malaysian, only son. He became a Buddhist monk and he walked away from his family. And he said, I've got nothing to do with your wealth. I've got nothing to do with your business. I don't want anything. He was educated abroad. I think he's a Harvard guy. I don't know. He's very successful, brilliant fellow. And then he takes up a monkhood, and he renounced everything. So I'm talking when we came to know 20 years ago, and this was that kept bothering him. And we knew someone very closely who was close to Ananta Krishnan. And then we came to know about the trouble the father had gone through, because his only son, and he has got an empire, a billionaire, and he wanted his son to take over and run the show, and a brilliant fellow. And he walks away from life and takes to monkhood. So, and it has nothing to do with it. And the father has to go and see him. The father goes to, I don't know, wherever, Thailand or wherever he is, and goes and sees him, as a monk. So, very, very sorry picture as far as the father was concerned. The son, he is in his own world, trying to whatever fit into his mindset. Arpit, all good? You know, when you, there are three types of people who relate to wealth. Rajasic people are constantly chasing wealth as if there is no end to it. They keep running behind it. Tamasic people, they give it up out of, you know, it causes, I don't know what's the right word for it, you know. And Vijayji, Tamasic,
Mental strain.
mental strain is Rajasic people. You know, they are constantly chasing, they're constantly amassing, they're running behind it, they're trying to build their riches, and they develop a mental fatigue, like this gentleman from rags to riches. You know, he's you know, but this reference I gave, he was born into an opulent life. It's not that this gentleman had to do, but you know, I don't want to categorize him into any particular thing. It's unfair to say so, to do so. But I'm only saying there are three types of relationships to people to wealth. Rajasic people keep chasing wealth and there's no saturation, there's no satiation. Tamasic people pursue wealth, but then they get into a sense of disgust again, you know, but it's not coming from growth. It is, they're just so used to the life of opulence, it almost makes them feel they just want to walk away from it. You know, it's enough is enough. But they're giving it away. They want to part with it. They don't enjoy it. Sattvic people, they are in it, and yet they're able to, in fact, establish a right contact with it. And establishment of right contact with wealth becomes because they're detached to it. Like King Janaka. We can take example of Janaka. Being a king, he was very detached to wealth. So wealth by itself doesn't cause anything to you. It is your wrong relationship to it. So Rajasic people, Tamasic people, Sattvic people, it's very interesting to look at life. And then see where we are. Yes, Ji. Hari Ji.
I feel to some extent laziness also is a factor which makes them to run away. You know, if you are in the world and you have to face the world, means you have to work, you have to put in your best effort. Whereas in a tamasic fellow, okay, I am happy. I don't want a million. I want only 10 rupees, and then I do nothing. It's a sort of sheer laziness, you know, to put in hard work.
So wealth can breed discontentment. Wealth can breed laziness.
Yeah.
Wealth breeds indulgence.
Yes.
Where there is wealth, there thrives a life of indulgence. You worship the senses. You know, you. In fact, Oliver Goldsmith, if I'm not wrong, he says, where wealth accumulates, men decay. At some stage we have analyzed this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where wealth accumulates, men decay. You know, you lead a life of indulgence and you lose your values. You know, but very rarely you find people who are detached to wealth. Very rare, very rare. That's what in the Bhajagovindam, the verse which says, Artham anartham bhavaya nityam nasti tata sukha lesha satyam putradapi dhana bhajam bhitihi sarvatraisha vihitaritihi. You know what is the translation of the verse? He says wealth is a calamity, he says. Artham anartham. How many of us agree to that? Huh?
Guruji, I have one more point to say, and it is also to some extent selfishness. When I have got money, okay, I have already experienced everything, or I don't want anything more. I don't want anything more.
Yeah.
But forgetting the fact that he can work hard, he can earn more money, and he can feed so many others when he has got the power, and he has got the skill to utilize his skill to the best, more than what he is doing.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people who need it and who don't have it.
Mm.
So it shows also to a great amount of selfishness that I am trying to run away. I have enjoyed, I have got what I wanted, I have experienced everything. Now it is over.
Yeah. In fact,
when I think only
correct.
about myself.
Yes. To sum up all of this, tamasic relationship wealth, there's something called as, I don't know how many of you have heard it before. RPG, have you heard this? The term called wealth fatigue syndrome. It is an actual terminology that exists in the industry. It's called wealth fatigue syndrome.
Yes, I think it was Guruji, a New York Times article from some time ago, or
Yes.
some article about where, that there's this unending desire, and but then people are worn out by the pursuit of wealth.
It could be you, it could be, so when you say you get fatigued and tired by the pursuit of wealth, it is rajas. Yeah. A fellow who can be fatigued being in wealth is tamas, isn't it? So when you don't relate with it, you get suffocated with it. You again, I'm using the word suffocation, as I think Vijayji also said, getting bored and not inclined to keep the chase. Yeah, you become almost redundant. It becomes, it is, you feel sick about it. Yeah, Vijayji?
Perhaps, Guruji, the phenomenon which happened in the 60s, where they used to call them flower children. I mean, they had all the money in the world, and then, they were getting bored of it, and everybody started going away. Whether there is an element of rebellion was also there, I won't know. But then they just didn't care for the money because they had a lot of money.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. I think very, very pertinent aspect. Ramji, you were saying something?
Hari Om Guruji.
Yes,
basically, there may be some people who don't have any interest in wealth. They may be born in wealth. They may not have any interest in it. It could be something, it is very different from the sattvic disinterest. Sattvic disinterest is a detachment, but they will continue to generate wealth. Whereas in the first one, the tamasic one, it is a kind of a boredom, and it is a kind of disinterest.
Yeah.
Which basically gives them an opportunity to stay unengaged with wealth, either creation or enjoyment. They don't even enjoy the wealth.
Correct. They don't enjoy it. They don't. They're not interested in it so much, so they walk away from it.
Yeah.
That's a tamasic. So when you push it to the extremity, this is the symptoms. And even Vijayji is saying the same thing, isn't it? So much they had. What was the term you use, Vijayji?
Flower children. Yeah.
Flower children. Yeah. So we see it exactly happening. If you, and so the more so we understand when we have these values, we'll be able to relate to it. That's the beauty of it. Very true. Setuji has a reference.
This came in the press. This happened some years back. There are a lot of Arab princes live in the US, and they have palaces, jets, and all that. One of the prince, I think, is from Saudi family or something. He wrote a suicide note saying that he's out of sheer boredom. He's taking his life. The wealth itself has bored him. So he says he has everything and he is simply bored.
So what is the difference between us and him? Setuji, the question is to you. What is the difference between us and him?
We are not. We are towards Satvik.
No. That's a nice way of justifying ourselves. I only say that. Sir, we can't claim ourselves to be Sattvic until you're established in it.
Yeah, towards. That's why I use the word towards.
It's like any shop you go, they say discount 70%, but the small caption will be up to. Up to is not seen. 60%, 70%, 80% is seen. When you walk into the store, because 80%, you say, wow, where is 80%? Sir, that one product 80%, rest all only 20%, sir. Then why you say 80%, sir? Up to, sir, up to. The up to is not seen. And the mother is neither. Now, sir, what I'm trying to get at when I ask that question is in the verse in Bhajagovindam, I said, Artham anartham bhavaya nityam. Where in that verse he says, wealth is calamitous. Truly does reflect constantly. He says, truly there is not even little happiness from it. So why are these wealthy people, the truly wealthy people who have seen the pinnacle of success or luxury or comfort, what money can buy, what they have genuinely experienced, which you and I have not experienced because we have not lived that life. We all are successful. You all are very successful in your own right. But you and I, deep within, have a craving for wanting more. You want somewhere you want to say, I want to have another project. I want to have another million. Can I get an extra contract? I want to buy that extra house. I want to buy that new thing. There's somewhere deep within us, there is a desire for more. Now, for people who have truly got all what money can buy, they have not reached sattva, but they've understood the truth that there is no happiness in wealth. Now, either you experience it through being born into it or having amassed so much wealth, end of it you realize there's nothing in it, or you realize it by study of the Shastras that there is least, he says, truly. The words he uses, Sukha lesha satyam. Na asti tata Sukha lesha satyam. Or this realization to happen is very, very rare in people. It requires a lot of wisdom to be able to realize that there is no happiness in it. Very rare you come across people who understand the same experience of, you're saying, of an Arab who is truly fits into the category who says there is no happiness from wealth. Avalo sattva irka sir nambal kuda. Do we have that much sattva, that much wisdom that there is no happiness in wealth? Can anybody claim? I don't claim so. With all the understanding and knowledge, I don't claim so. It's a long way to go. Let's not assume a state where we don't belong. We've got to be very true to ourselves and say, this is what I am, and then work on it. You got to be very fair, isn't it? But I'm only trying to tell how life can be looked at with reference to wealth, how the different categories, the tamasic people, what they experience, in fact, some of them do experience the truth. So even the Ananta Krishnan son perhaps has experienced this truth, that there is no happiness in it. Therefore, he dropped it and is going away. He went away. So from his child, he was only seen a golden spoon. That's all. Everything, he has only seen that. And he says there's nothing in it, man. The moment he walks out, everywhere he puts his feet, there's a red carpet. Man, come on, man. It's not life. There's nothing, no maja in it. You feel sick. That's what I said, the wealth fatigue syndrome. We wouldn't want to be in that state, but it's interesting to examine. The tamasic fellows, they understand the core, what you either learn it through knowledge or through experience. What do we prefer, sir?
Knowledge.
Through knowledge. And in order to learn through knowledge, what do we need to do? That's a very famous word amongst you all.
Sadhana.
Sadhana also is a very famous word. Why I say famous is I keep hearing the word. You know, there is some little takeaways and all that is being provided and worked on. And the many times when the takeaway comes, that word crops up, and I remember I have never used that word, but they inject that word. What is that word?
Guruji, my experience is there is a lot of joy in giving and sharing. Wealth is important, critical, but how we relate with that wealth is what is important. We have to work for higher with there is so you get hooked to higher things, then you enjoy, celebrate life.
Correct. No, which is what it is, which is the sattva, you know, because you have experience. I know you are talking from experience. I know, knowing you well, I know I say that. But when you have that experience of being a giver, and when you sacrifice for a larger cause, you understand what money can give you. You understand that. So you hold money in the right light. You view it in a right perspective.
I feel everyone is by their true nature is they are generous. It is only buried with different layers. So everyone is has that
potential.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Only thing is they have to work. The moment they get into that habit, they only know that the joy. They have to make a beginning somewhere, and then it is a.
The problem is the challenge is the beginning is a painful exercise. And the moment you grow beyond it and you see or taste the joy of giving, then nobody can hold you back, isn't it? Very true. Very true.
And I have talked to some very big givers and takers. They have felt that actually as they state the giving, it goes on generating also without or they always feel purnam and full. They never feel empty. So
yeah, very true. You know? But you don't do for that sake, obviously.
Yeah, we don't do, but it does happen. This has been shared. They don't do with it. Then it is not a planned activity.
Correct. Very true. As Khalil Gibran says, their coffers are never empty. Givers, their life fills it always in some form or other. Once you want to give, it's never empty. All right. So
Guruji, this is
yes,
Ram
sir.
here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry.
There is a theory in psychology called Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. There are different motivations for people to pursue what they pursue.
Right.
After a certain level, you might pursue for like the stage where you in the hierarchy of needs, there is a stage where you need recognition. That recognition actually makes people go deeper and higher into some of the activities, not to get money. Money comes incidentally, it comes with their actions, but their real motivation is recognition. And recognition, the ultimate step in that hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. Self-actualization is what we are talking about, that you become a sattvic in self-actualization. But these are steps. Sometimes you have to go through these steps to reach the sattvic level. And so I was just trying to say that everybody will not work for money beyond certain level. I mean, up to certain level they will do, because they need security of money. That is also a stage in the hierarchy of needs. But after that, they work for recognition. If you have recognition at village level, then you will try for district level, then you will try for state level, then you will try for national level, things like that. So I just wanted to say that there is also this opinion or theory in psychology that people get motivated by different things, not only money.
Undoubtedly, yeah. There are many things that could drive people, But the saturation point is never there, no? That lobha, as we call it, the desire where it metamorphoses into lobha or greed, that doesn't die because the desire has been fed. It's not that you have developed vairagya towards wealth. It's just that you found something else fascinating you. Fame fascinates you, recognition fascinates you, positions fascinate you, power fascinates you. But you have not developed vairagya towards money. And the vairagyam varla. So it is just another toy you have replaced with. It's like once you're, let's say I'm addicted to smoking and I want to quit. I quit smoking. I pick up, what do you call that? What do you call that? People keep chewing, no?
Chewing gum.
Chewing gum is better off, sir. You can chew chewing gum.
Tobacco,
gutka. So you've replaced cigarette with gutka. You may say, oh, I've given up. In fact, you have not given up, you've replaced. You're indulged in something else. So when people aspire for something else, it's not that they've risen above money. It's just that there's something else that has drawn their attention. So the vairagya has not come. So we need to understand the growth is when you have dispassion towards it. Why you become dispassionate? Because you're truly passionate of a larger cause or a purpose. As somebody was saying, as Setuji was saying, when someone who has tasted the joy of giving, of parting or serving, they will not run behind amassing and accumulating, because they have tasted the life of a giver. Then you understand what we referred 29th verse of Bhajagovindam, where he says, truly there is no least happiness in it. So when that maturity comes, then you rise above it. You understand money has a role to play. It has a place in one's life. But then, exactly as he referred to that wealthy Arab in US, he committed suicide, that there's no happiness in it. That realization comes not because of being fed up with wealth, because you understood the value of it. Everything has a certain value, isn't it, in life, sir? Like this knowledge also has a certain value. So it is that realization we are saying. But at different stages, like every stage of our life, something always inspired us. But is that the ultimate? Right now, something is driving us. Is that the ultimate, sir? Any guarantee that your mind will not shift to anything else? Just because my mind is drawn to something else doesn't mean I have developed vairagya for it. No. It's just the mind's fascination, it's the desires.
No, I was trying to understand whether these three stages of tamasic, rajasic and
sattvic
are they fixed in nature, or is there that you move through different stages step by step and you reach sattvic level? Are you sattvic from the beginning, or you become sattvic over a period of time through your experiences and your motivations?
Yes, in fact, the second is right. Each individual is born with a certain proportion. Like you have a certain proportion. It could be 40, 30, 30. 40% sattva, 30% rajas, 30% tamas. Every individual is a combination of these three. Now, if you have worked on your own enhancement of your spiritual quotient, means which is your enriching yourself as a human, when you develop yourself as a human, then the sattvic quotient starts changing, and proportionately other two die away. But if you have not worked on your sattva, if you have chased the rajas and tamas quotient, sattva keeps deflating and the other proportionately rise. And it reflects, in fact, you would appreciate that you can look at life from every aspect of life from these windows of sattva, rajas, tamas. So what we're saying, we're just looking at wealth from the perspective of rajas, tamas, sattva. Earlier we looked at life, how you can embrace life from renunciation as sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. Every aspect of life is categorized into these three, can be categorized. Because everything in life is nothing but gunas. That's what we say. These gunas are the sattva, rajas, tamas. I know Harishji wants to say something. Even Badrinathji wants something. Harishji, perhaps, yeah, you could.
Guruji, let Badri finish first.
Yes, Badriji.
This in economics, after great difficulty, economists defined what money is. Okay, and finally they said money is what money does. So it is the purpose of money that defines what money is. So now, in the course of your actions, if money comes to you, and if you lead a life of moderation where that money doesn't go into, satisfying one's own increasing sensual pleasures. So I think moderation is the key. Once you have moderation in life, if you have money in excess of what your moderate needs require, then automatically, going back to the definition of money, money is what money does. You start using that money for a higher purpose. It's like the spiritual journey, where you renounce something, not for its own sake, but you renounce for a higher purpose. So if you don't have a higher purpose, then renunciation doesn't mean anything. It's what I think. Okay. So at each step of the way, you need a higher purpose. So even by being part of the world, if one can find a higher purpose for money, then money doesn't suffocate you. So
people usually justify, I am not doing for myself, but for my children.
No, then it's not a higher purpose. I feel that's not a higher purpose. It has to be because one's family is very close to oneself. It is almost, it's like the painting on a house. Okay, there is the house and there is the paint which is stuck to the house. So your family is stuck to you. Okay, so I think it will be self-deception if one thinks that by doing only for one's family, it's a higher purpose. Yeah. See, again, there's moderation. You can't neglect your family also. That's what I'm saying. This razor's edge of not tilting too much this way and neglecting your dharma, and on the other hand, tilting the other way and, doing things that you're not prepared for. Okay. So what I'm saying is self-indulgence is toppling on one side of the razor's edge. Okay. And neglect of one's dharma is falling on the other side of the razor. So this art of walking on that razor's edge is what I call moderation. And once one is able to find that moderation for oneself, then one can then act in the world without a lot of these conflicts, because then you have a purpose for everything. Even so, if you give the example of King Janaka had wealth and we didn't affect him because he had a purpose for it.
So all our lives, what it needs is a clear purpose or an ideal or a goal in life. All of us need this higher vision.
Right.
Because what we already house is desires, we already house attachments, we already are bound by our infatuations, our emotions, the I and my, all that very much there. The only way to ensure we don't get trapped in these entanglements is to have a clear-cut vision. Can you envision this? Now, you're all are recipients of this knowledge. You're all come by appointment without anybody knocking at your door. Can you all envision that? Let us serve this cause so that it can serve a larger number of people. Now, why I have mentioned that is that I don't have anything in mind when I say this.
No, exactly.
But if there is a goal or a vision, if there's a common cause, we all can unite with. Each one of us are in our own worlds doing different things. But if there is a string that can string all these individuals as pearls, can we all come together and use all what we have as an offering to serve this cause? It's not the banner we are talking about. It's not the guru we are talking about. It's the knowledge, these principles, these values that can reach out. Can we envision that goal? Once it's not in classrooms, it's not in books. It is in real life. Can you get down to earth? Can you get down to the ground level and do what is needed? I can be dreaming of a beautiful garden, but if you don't go on to the garden and pull your sleeves and your pants up and start plowing the field and getting rid of and doing the gardening, you will not get the garden there. It'll only be in your thoughts. So you are aware there is a true ideal or a goal, instantly it expresses as action towards it.
Right.
Isn't it, Badriji?
Yeah.
And that is that which brings in a balance, which you rightly said, it is that fine balance.
Right. And
The
it's not
razor's edge.
even knowledge. Okay, if one acquires knowledge for the sake of, strutting around the world saying I'm a knowledgeable person, then it has the same effect as too much money. Whereas if the knowledge is shared, like what you're doing, like a lot of, all the great masters have done, okay, or even the great teachers, scientists have done, then there's a higher purpose, and therefore the knowledge doesn't suffocate you,
Sir,
it's not claustrophobic.
if I can say, what I do 1 hour a day or 1 hour 15 minutes a day is the most insignificant part of my sadhana. Teaching this knowledge is the most insignificant. What is the real significant is 98.75% what I'm doing, which is the ground level.
All right.
This is the effort. This is not if I don't do that, this is insignificant. You are only seeing this. You don't see the other part. Therefore, my point is to that part which you don't see and is assumed. You only are all connected to this 1 hour of the knowledge, but you're not connected to what is it that goes for this 1 hour to happen. That is the real sadhana. That is the growth. That is the goal. That is the vision I'm talking about. This is like going to the garden and plucking the flowers and fruits. Or you can go and shake the tree, the flowers will fall. This is not it. To go and clear the soil, to plant the seed, nurture it, nourish it, make sure it starts sprouting, make sure it needs. That is what is that is in fact is known as karma. And only when you do karma and seva, which is unselfish actions, which is to serve a cause you believe in. Now, all I'm throwing at you all is a goal, a purpose. Can you identify with this purpose of this wisdom? Can I serve this wisdom? Can I serve this cause? I'm a direct beneficiary of this wisdom. Can I serve it so that it can serve the larger people? So I'm dangling a carrot. Can you pick it up? Does it inspire you? Can you hold on to it? Does it motivate you? Not to be a part of a satsang like this. Does it inspire me to offer my actions towards its attainment? That is going to transform me, not the mere knowledge and the intellectualization that we all are a part of. Essential though, but this by itself is just an embellishment.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Knowledge Correct. Is also what it does. Knowledge for its own sake is meaningless.
It's meaningless. It's actually the icing on the cake. If there's no cake, what's the use of the icing?
Right. Yeah. So all these things, all these acquisition, knowledge is also a kind of acquisition. So whether it's money or knowledge or whatever, unless there is a purpose, it's meaningless. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you said it, and this is clarified. I've often said this, the most essential part is karma. If you don't do that, it doesn't take you anywhere to it. Harish ji.
Guruji, you have summed it up already very, very well. I was trying to, in a small way, say parts of what you have said. You have said the whole. So I really, but just to recapitulate, what I was wanting to talk about is one thing which you brought out. One is the matter of a proportion. So as you go higher and higher, what is the proportion of higher ideals to normal mundane issues? The second is, what is the elevated level? That means how are you going higher? Are you evolving or devolving? That is the second aspect which you brought up. And the third is, which is what Ram referred to. It is interesting that he talked of Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy, or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, very interestingly, mirrors what our ancient Vedanta says of tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic, right? Basically, if you look at it, it's a triangle, and it says you have basic needs of food, shelter, all these things, the basic needs at the bottom. Then you have what they call physiological needs, right? Or sorry, these are physiological. You have psychological needs, which is emotion, recognition, all this kind of relationships, etc. And then you have self-actualization, which is the self-fulfillment needs, right? So, and like in everything else, it's a pyramid. As you go higher, the number of these diverse pulls becomes lower. So the number, it actually goes down to a level where the number of desires keep reducing. It is equivalent to that. And if you look at it, his basic needs correspond very much to what we call tamasic, because it is the base physical existential level, right? It is with your day-to-day, let's say, dilemmas and problems. And then the rajasic is more about the emotional disturbances, etc., which are caused. And therefore, it is more to do with your psychological needs. So that's the next level. And we all go through this, and then you come to this self-actualization, which is more about fulfillment. And finally, you come to a tip where there is nothing. And as Badriji very beautifully said in a note to us some time back, that when you reach the top only, you can see what is there below. So there is nothing more to see on top. So it's actually the same philosophy. It is again, Maslow is again talking the same thing. And because there are more at the lowest level, you have more diverse pulls, and therefore more energy is dissipated actually in staying there.
Yes, Ji.
And the level of dissipation keeps going down. Therefore, your actions get more energized, which is what you said. When you have a higher purpose and you concentrate, it's like laser being focused. When you focus on the higher, then you actually generate more energy. You actually become more productive. You actually become more useful. So it is just that concept that the focus, the higher, produces that laser-like focus or laser-like energy. It increases the energy. It's a resonance. And that is what we are all talking of. So the aspect of you generate more energy and you avoid dissipation of energy as you move up the pyramid.
Yes, I think the concepts are very sound, and the comparison, as you rightly said, the truths are universal, aren't they? They can never go wrong. Wise men in whichever era they said, whichever time zone they have shared, it's always, they spoke the eternal truths. That's what the eternal wisdom is all about. But unless until our actions change, if our attitude changes, it's no use. And if I say, if there's still gross selfishness in your thoughts and actions, and yet you speak, if one speaks words of wisdom, it's jarring. It's like, as they say, gold on a mule, useless. So rather let our actions be pure and sacrificial than be selfish and we speak words of wisdom. It doesn't befit you. Don't demean the knowledge, and I must say, from a higher standpoint, every action is selfish. So you must constantly strive to keep shedding your own imperfections. So it's a constant effort. Unless until you are in tune to that, you wouldn't fall a trap. The knowledge itself is the biggest trap. Beware. It's a very big trap.
Guruji, just wanted to add one thing again.
Very short. We already overshot.
Just as what you have said and what was also there in Maslow, he says that the higher things start mattering more only when the lower is satisfied. So when your desire to eat or hunger is satisfied, only then you can start thinking of recreation. Also, Vedanta says the same thing. It says it in the other way, that it says it in the positive way. When you attach yourself to the higher, the lower becomes meaningless. There are two ways of saying exactly the same thing.
I would leave you all to do the intellectual comparison and the study, and I am only interested in you all getting to the ground level. Like Vivekananda said to those who want to learn philosophy, he said, first go play football, then come to me. People first get on to some action, man. Don't just get stuck in these classrooms. And I'm not dismissing anything that is said. It is nothing but the truth. But Harishji, I know you would understand where I'm coming from, and I know it resonates with everyone. It should resonate. So what really matters is not this an hour of this interaction. What should matter and mean more to you is, what am I doing to serve this wisdom? Just look in the mirror and ask this candid question. What am I doing? What can I do? Don't say what I have done. Oh, this I've already done. No, I've already done this. What more? That is the beginning and end of your growth. You must give your life for it. Sacrifice yourself for it. And that's when the knowledge will serve you. You quantify it to that extent, only knowledge will serve you. So let's not get carried away and get lost in this mere empty words. These words are empty if you don't serve it. That's the real sadhana, not this. This is nothing. Anybody can do. In fact, all of you are far more knowledgeable and wise to share it. Okay.